Hey, this is Pastor Curry, pastor of the East Zion Fair Baptist Church, Wilmington's most exciting church, the church that love ya and ain't a thing you can do about it. Today with Coffee with Curry, we have one of the great superintendents of our time. Dr. Greene is here with us, and he's going to be a part of the Coffee with Curry. Listen, he's done some phenomenal things. He had a great trajectory in his life, and I want to make sure that we highlight it today. Why don't you call somebody real quick? Tell them Coffee with Curry is on, and let's get after it. And we're back. Well, it's a joy and a privilege, as I've indicated already, that I have the privilege now of sitting down with Dr. Greene, who is the superintendent for the Red Clay School District. It is a joy. I met him a couple of weeks ago. Dr. Greene, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Curry. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, I just am so grateful that you're here. During the time of Newt passing, I got a chance to meet you, and I've heard so many great things about you. How long have you been with the Red Clay School District?
So March of this year made 3 years.
Made 3 years.
Yeah, so I came on board March of 2019.
Okay, and you survived.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And it's interesting because you came in March of 2019, so that's right before the COVID pandemic.
Right before the COVID pandemic set in. Okay. So literally a year within the pandemic struck, and as they say, we're currently living it. We're not out of it yet, but pretty much the entire time of my tenure in Red Clay has been dealing with COVID and all the other implications that have come along with it.
Great. Well, before we get into the heart of your professional career, I want to just take a moment, as we do on Coffee with Curry, and just talk a little bit about you, the person, because that's what a lot of my audience, they love to hear about the person. Right. They get a chance to see you. You're doing some great and phenomenal things within the district. But where was Dorrell raised at, and what kind of background does he have?
So I was born in Easton, Maryland, in Talbot County, Maryland Eastern Shore.
Okay.
So I'm the youngest of three. So Shirley Greene is my mother, Ernest Brown is my father. She's now Shirley Brown, but my name still remains Greene.
Okay.
And I moved to the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, the DMV, as it's affectionately known at home, in the 4th grade. And my formative years, I was raised in the DMV, Washington, D.C. metropolitan area in Prince George's County, Maryland. Completed high school, came to Delaware by way of the University of Delaware on an athletic scholarship.
Okay.
So I had the fortune of playing football at the University of Delaware, and kind of got comfortable. Landed a job in education, and I've been in Delaware ever since 1993.
All right, so you said you played football for the University of Delaware.
Yes,
what position did you play?
Defensive back.
Okay.
So cornerback, free safety.
Okay, does that mean you're fast, or does that mean you're...
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both?
High intellect in terms of being able to know the game, but athletic enough to hold my own.
Oh, so you're a true athlete?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I like that. I often tease people when they come on this show because you never know which way my questions are going to go, given the fact that, when you said that you played for the University of Delaware, most people sit on that couch are HBCU graduates, but you being from a traditionally a majority school, and most of the staff who works with me are from a traditional majority school, I tend to tease them. How was it dealing with University of Delaware as a student?
So to be quite honest, I wanted to go to an HBCU.
Okay.
So my hope was either to attend Norfolk State.
Oh, good.
And my father had the wisdom of, he said something to me, I'm not going to allow you to go from home to home. So growing up in the D.C. area, I could go to any urban environment. I can, I'm comfortable around our people. He had experience in the military and figured I needed a different perspective in terms of how the world kind of moved and operated. And I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship offer, and University of Delaware became that destination. But it was interesting. When I came to University of Delaware, never heard of Delaware. Delaware Blue Hens or football, University of Delaware, and a high school teammate of mine turned down a scholarship offer. And so this is fate and how God works. Never received any kind of formal letter or anything from the University of Delaware. And my high school teammate, my best friend at the time, decided that he was going to go to William & Mary.
Okay.
And as a result of Delaware seeing me on his highlight tapes, his highlight film, literally their last official visit or visitation weekend, they invited me up. So they literally came, a coach came on a Wednesday, said, listen, if you and your family don't have anything to do this upcoming weekend, we would love to have you come up. And by that Sunday, I had a full scholarship offer.
Wow.
And so it was God.
Yes, and that's an awesome, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
And I thought you were going to spin it a different way, in that a lot of times people who have a desire to go to HBCUs, I like your father's spin too, but people who go to HBCUs, they tend to, or those who go to majority schools, they tend to go to those majority schools because they do offer them scholarships and things of that nature. But you were a scholar as well.
Yes, yes, sir.
And then that's really, really, really powerful. So you had an opportunity to go to the University of Delaware, and you how was campus life for you?
It was interesting. I mean, until this day, there were very few of us, so you kind of stood out. And I chose a major which was elementary teaching education, which was predominantly, my classes were predominantly filled by white females. It's kind of mirror what our current state of education, public education, looks like. It's a female-dominated field. So I found myself being one of a few. But I did have the fortune of being connected to a group called Aspire. Which was for minority students, black and brown students who were looking to, have a support or a network. So I had an advisor by the name of Mr. Jim Shaw, Barbara Van Dornick, Gail Riss, were all, support systems for us. And so we created a network of minority students within the field of elementary teaching education, where we kind of supported each other, more importantly, I would say they supported me.
I got you.
And kept me grounded and focused on not just the aspect of athletics, but I'm a student before anything else. And so, I owe it to my fellow students, alumni who were part of the Aspire program at the University of Delaware during my time, who really supported me. And again, you see how majority, cultures actually work and operate, and create some networks that, fortunate enough benefits me to this day. So it gave me a well-rounded, balanced perspective on truly how the world works.
That's excellent. We share something alike in that. And even though you went to a historically white college, I went to a historically black college. I was an elementary education major as well. But our similarities is that those who were in my major with me were white women. Yeah. So it's something that is a reflection of what's going on even in society. But it's good to know that you started there. Now, did you do your student teaching here in Delaware, or?
So interesting enough, I did my student teaching in Red Clay. At Richardson Park Elementary. So it truly did come full circle March of 2019 when I became the superintendent, because, and I want to thank Miss Carol Wright, who was my cooperating teacher, who was hard on me. She showed me the ropes. She was truly old school. And I thank her for it till this day, because those are lessons that I still carry forward in my current role based on my student teaching experience.
And that's really an awesome thing. So when you left the University of Delaware, you had an opportunity to teach. Did you stay in Delaware, or did you go back to?
No, I stayed in Delaware. The cost of living, man. Moving to the D.C. area, I was comfortable at that point being on my own. 90 minutes from home, so I could jump in the car. I was close enough, but far enough away. My family tends to think that 95 only travels one way, which is south. So they didn't too often come north. And granted, my parents do now, because the grandchildren, and they support my children. I have 3 children, along with my wife Benita, who is a world language. She's a Spanish teacher at Hodgsonville Tech.
Oh, okay.
So my parents actually spend more time up here now, but during that early stage, I would go home, and but I was, again, close enough away but far enough away to be independent.
One thing about parents, even if they don't come to visit you, they'll come visit the grands.
Yeah, they will.
So you got them by giving them some grandchildren, so that will keep them close enough. You did mention that. Did you meet your wife in college, or did
Met my wife in college.
Okay.
Yes, I met my wife in college. She was a student athlete. She came to Delaware by way of Reading, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
So she was a softball player. So we met at the University of Delaware.
Okay.
And
so football and softball.
Football and softball.
Okay, that's pretty good. So I mean, your children. How old are your children?
So our oldest, Jordan, he's a senior at Delaware Military Academy. So he'll be graduating this year. And he made the decision that he's going to go to University of Delaware for mechanical engineering.
Okay. Excellent.
Our oldest daughter, Jada, is a 9th grader at Conrad Schools of Science, and our youngest, Jasmine, is a 6th grader at Conrad Schools of Science.
Now, are they in the Red Clay district?
They're in the Red Clay School District.
Oh, so you have everybody.
I'm a resident of Red Clay as well.
Okay,
so,
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you live right here within the confines of Wilmington area. Okay, all right. So we had an opportunity to hear the great of you leaving and going to college and deciding you weren't going to go back home. Right. Parents who decided they was not going to come north, they was just going to keep going south until you had grandchildren, until they had grandchildren, and then they decided that they wanted to come visit. What does Dr. Greene do?
So a lot. I mean, right now I'm immersed in obviously my work and my family. You know, having a high school senior, and I know you call me Dr. Greene, so I appreciate and everyone acknowledging and manifesting that. I'm still finishing up my dissertation at Wilmington University.
Is it all but dissertation?
Yeah, so I'm ABD, but plugging away, still trying to complete this, and so I appreciate you speaking it into existence.
Yeah.
I'm a motorcyclist, so I do enjoy riding, and that was one of the passions that Newt and I did share together, in our friendship, not only professionally but personally. I'm an avid sports guy, so I like sports. But more importantly, just being a family man, really investing in my family and more importantly in the community.
Good.
I have 17,000. If you look at all the students throughout Red Clay, that becomes that extended family. So I approach my job, the same way that I approach life, right? And understanding that individuals like Melanie Caldwell, God rest her soul, who was a 10th grade high school teacher who saw enough in me at a time where I didn't really see, things in myself, where she poured into me. So always that mindset that, that's my role as an educational leader, is really to, live my work. And it's a life's passion. People will always challenge you to say work-life balance. It's hard to separate the two, especially in the current times that we're living. But I try my best to keep a level head, keep a perspective around, work, home life, family life, and how to ultimately support the community at large.
And so what do you do for fun? I know you
exercise.
Okay. Okay.
I definitely, I'm a believer, so I am a Christian.
I was going to ask you that. I'm always careful about asking, but your language reflects it very strongly.
So, it's interesting, Dr. Carey. I took at university, it was my master's. I got my master's at the University of Delaware as well, and it was a school law course. And now that I look back, my professor was also a believer, and one of the assignments that he gave us was around the separation of church and state. And he said, too often people will challenge you in public schools, especially this idea of God and His God in schools. So he gave us an assignment. He said, for a week, I want you to count how many times you encounter God. And he's like, I'm going to give you 2 off the bat. He said, you say the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. It's one nation under who? One nation under God. And he said, do you pay for field trips? Do you, serve school lunch? Is there currency being exchanged? And what's on a dollar? Under who we trust.
Absolutely.
And so, realizing that, before anything, I'm a child of God. And I did come into my faith, a little later on, but always knew that God had a plan and purpose for my life.
Wow.
And I always felt that way, especially growing up in the Washington, D.C. area during the height of the crack epidemic, higher crime rate, murder rates, different things growing up in that environment. I was always given a clear path, or had a vision that, sports was an avenue for me to achieve or accomplish more. I never said I wanted to be a professional athlete, but God granted me with the ability that I could earn an athletic scholarship. And then 2019, I was actually inducted into the University of Delaware Football Hall of Fame, or an Athletic Hall of Fame, excuse me. So yeah, I'm definitely strong in my faith.
I'm grateful that you shared that, and I'm grateful that you are. Dr. Tony Allen, who is the president of Delaware State University, great man. Matter of fact, he's a fellow Hornet. I'm not Hornet, but Blue Hen. Yeah. And one of the things that it always strikes me is that he's free with sharing his faith. Given the church and state issue that had always been the thing, and I think sometimes people who are agnostic, who just want to start things, you know how to separate the two. You know how to do, but it makes me feel good to know that you can be in the position that you're in and know that what governs you, because it helps you in the decisions that you make. Truly. In life. So I'm always impressed. When he was here, I was shocked how much he was saying things that would lead towards his faith, and to hear you saying it, that's good. Yeah. You know why it's good? Because African American men need to know that there's a power higher than themselves.
That's right.
And that you can be rooted.
Right.
You know, and not over churchy where you everything is spiritual, right, but it is a major part of your life, and I think that's really great. That wasn't the way the interview was supposed to go,
right,
but I appreciate that so very much. I just wanted to say that to you. I really appreciate that. So we move past the University of Delaware, but before we do, was there a reason why you did not get into any of the fraternities or sororities? Not sororities, but fraternities.
No, honestly, there was a point, where I think the Kappas were very active, the Qs were very active. One of my early mentors, Jonathan Hall, God rest his soul, he was an Alpha. He was probably the only other, when I was a freshman, black male who was in elementary teaching. But I was just kind of consumed with, being a student athlete, getting my degree, and obviously football served as a fraternity, as a brotherhood to some degree.
Absolutely.
So it kind of filled that space, and it never really was a time. But I would say that the Qs were I kind of gravitated to them. Ricky Detweiler,
most definitely.
Kevin White.
Oh wow, you named the real brothers.
Lamar Gunn, some other folks on so definitely.
So you know the powerful cues. Yeah. You don't know the little brothers like myself, but you know the power. That's good. But I asked that question because when you shared your faith, when you were able to share the trajectory of your life, it is such a remarkable experience. To see the fate, or I could say how God has just brought all things together. I often say we're not here by accident. Yeah. It's all providential.
Right.
And you were able to acknowledge it, and that's why I guess I threw that fraternity piece in there. But if you would have said you wanted to be a Cap, I would have threw you off the stage just so you all know that. Or a Sigma, like somebody who's watching us right now is saying, dang, why didn't he say anything about Sigma? So we just did for the sake of you knowing it. But we don't really like Sigmas. But anyway, let me move this just a little bit further. But before I do that, let me just go to a break. And then when we come back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about Red Clay. I am so impressed with what you're doing and the whole Red Clay School District. So I just want to talk a little bit about it when we come back. We'll be right back. And we're back. It has it's a joy having Dr. Greene with us today. And even though you said you have not earned the degree, you really did, because there's a lot of people who are all but dissertation who have did all the work. But I'm sure, and if you need your support, I'm here for you too, my brother, in that area too. Yeah. But I know you're going to do well because you are focused, and whenever you're focused, that's what happens. But Dr. Greene, I am just impressed with Red Clay. 14-to-1 ratio with its teacher, student to teacher. The largest, even though Christiana will say they're the largest, and I'm sure you'll clear that up. But the largest, you have 92% graduation rate, and for it to be in the city of Wilmington and to have that level of success, it caught my attention. Tell me in your own words, one, how did you get to, before we get to Red Clay, because I put that in the front for reasons, but how did you even think about wanting to be an educator?
So it was actually, again, I now looking back, it was divine order.
Okay.
And so when I was in high school, I attended Sutler High School in Prince George's County, Maryland. A good student, not really tapping into my potential. And so when I spoke about my athletic scholarship, my high school football team wasn't a very good team. Right, so we won 4 games in 4 years, and I tell everyone,
bad news bears.
One year we were defeated, right? So we went 0-10, but I had the luxury and the privilege of playing varsity as a freshman. So our JV football team maybe had 15 players, mind you. I mean, I had a school of over 2,000 students.
Okay.
Right? And so we were similar in size to William Penn High School.
Okay.
And at that point, the JV program was disbanded. One of my teammates was ineligible, someone got hurt, and they were like, well, you really can't field a team with 12 players because you need 11 on the field at a time. One more person gets hurt, there's no substitutes. So they moved several of us up on varsity, and I was able to play varsity as a freshman. So, and I was 5'5", 120 pounds at that point in time.
Oh, wow.
So, imagine a 5'5", 120-pound guy playing varsity. I'm walking through this high school, 2,000 students, and I got a little rep. My grades dropped. And so I went from being a student in the International Baccalaureate program to my sophomore year, now what they currently call college prep, which we actually removed that nomenclature, and I'll explain more why in Rec Clay. But it was the lowest level basic courses that my high school offered. And I met a teacher by the name of Melanie Caldwell, and she pulled me to the side one day and said, "Why are you in my class?"
Wow.
So she saw something in me, and she's like, "You know what, you got some leadership qualities about you. You would make a good teacher." And she gave me an article from the Des Moines Press about the need for black males in education. Now, mind you, this is in 1990.
Okay.
But she saw something in the same issue that we're currently having in education, right? For the need for black males was existent when I was in high school. But I started to fill out college applications and questionnaires, and they would just ask areas of interest. And because Ms. Caldwell said I would be a good teacher, I would just put teaching down.
Okay.
And then when I took my visit to the University of Delaware, I put that on my pre-visit questionnaire. Well, unbeknownst to me, University of Delaware connected me with the Aspire program.
Okay.
And they kind of showed me what the trajectory of a 4-year degree would look like, what I would take during the fall semester, what I would take during the spring semester, in season, out of season. And so as fate would have it, I just kind of got into education, and it was really because, God put an angel, Ms. Melanie Caldwell, in my life, and she was that for so many other students as well. And I kind of just went along with that plan that, she saw something in me, had a belief in me. She said I'd be a good teacher. And, here I am 20 plus years later in public education and, superintendent of the largest school district in the state of Delaware.
While you were talking, I was thinking, you believed what you were told. Yeah. There's a term called self-fulfilling prophecy, where a lot of times when you hear that phraseology, it's negative. Yeah. But it could be used either way.
Right.
Someone told you something, you lived it out.
Yeah.
How do you convey that to our brothers? And I know this is not a show for men only, but that's where our biggest dilemma is. Because I heard that same argument. We need more black men in the classroom, the role model, to be the example. That's why I'm impressed with your leadership. But how do you get people to believe that they're better and can do better?
Well, I think you have to, when we talk about representation, if you don't see it, and if you see it, you can believe it. And I think too often we kind of see ourselves as athletes, as entertainers, as lawyers, as businessmen, as entrepreneurs, not realizing that every entrepreneur, every businessman, every athlete, every entertainer had a teacher.
Yeah.
And so why not allow it, to be us as black males to be able to do it? But I look back, it was out of love. Like she genuinely cared. And I think that was, the authenticity. Sometimes we tell people what we think they want to hear,
right,
rather than, telling them what they need to hear. And you can tell people the truth, and you can do it out of love. And that's what she did. And in that moment, like you said, it was, self-fulfilling in that I believed it enough to kind of, that she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. So I owe it to her, I owe it to my mom, I owe it to my dad, I owe it to my grandmother, everyone who loved and cared for me. And I had a lot of death, destruction, heartache, surrounding me that I didn't want to be one more example of that. And I think, unfortunately, what we see happening in Wilmington, that becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? That, I'm going to become what I've seen in terms of patterns, generational types of situations, So it's just about representation. And then I think it's for our educators, for us to put us on not a pedestal or platform, but to show that this is a viable profession for us to get in, and we can still attain the wealth it might be just by different means.
When you find yourself stressed out, or I don't want to use the word stressed out, when you find yourself overburdened or overwhelmed, do you use some of those positive people as your motivation?
Yeah, and there's still mentors. I mean, I think mentorship is critical.
Yeah.
I think as men in particular, this idea of suffering in silence, we tend to want to be safeguarded and hold on to it and feel like, oh, we're strong, we can handle it on our own. So being able to reach out and fellowship and connect with, other folks who have either gone through it. So I can, Mr. Maurice Pritchett, who, when I started teaching, so I actually had the benefit and privilege of doing my student teaching in Red Clay. I was hired in Christina School District. I did a stint at a residential group home for about 1.5 years, 2 years.
Here in Delaware?
Here in Delaware. And then I got into my first actual public teaching role was a 6th grade teacher at Bancroft under Mr. Maurice Pritchett, Mr. Peter Vassos, who has since passed.
Yeah.
But I saw how connected they were to the community and how they built, the staff to connect with students. And I went from Bancroft to Stubbs. So I was reassigned to Stubbs. I spent probably another 3 years at Stubbs, went back and got my master's in educational leadership and became an assistant principal at Bayard. And Bayard at the time was a K-6 elementary school.
Okay.
So I went from an assistant principal at Bayard to the principal at Bayard for K-6 before moving on to Harlan Elementary in Brandywine. So I've had the privilege of working in Christina, Brandywine, and now Red Clay, and I spent 2 years at the Department of Education as well. So
who were you under at the Department of Education?
Dr. Susan Bunting.
Okay.
She was the Secretary of Ed during my stint at DOE.
And we're back. Great show. I am just excited because of what we've been talking about. I had some lined up questions for Dr. Greene, and it seemed like it keeps going in another direction. It is powerful. It is very, very much important that we have positive role models for our community to see, and for him to be able to express his faith, to be able to share that he is a believer, to be able to share that he is a family man who loves his family, who's there supportive, and to not allow some of the misfortunes that may have been in his background, not so much even on his part, but that he experienced and witnessed, is very important for some person who is struggling, trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? It's never too late to make things happen. Dr. Greene, again, I am just grateful for what you have done. You've only been with us for about 2.5, 3 years now. You came at a bad time because COVID hit and everything just went haywire. Red Clay tended to have kept everything together, though. So you obviously have done some great things. I do want to know a little bit about some of your successes at Red Clay, given that, according to the data of right now, 92% of your graduates are 90% of your students are graduating, and that y'all are doing great things. So just tell me a little bit about your successes.
So, Red Clay, we have a lot of diverse, programs, schools, offerings. Again, we have Cab Calloway School of the Arts, Conrad Schools of Science, McCain High School, the John Dickinson School, AI High School, a variety of middle school offerings and programs, I think through the traditional sense. But we serve a diverse, demographic, stakeholder group, not only the city of Wilmington, but the surrounding suburbs. We have a high English learner population that we serve as well, along with students with disabilities and special needs. So we truly, I tell everyone, we're a microcosm of society. If you pick out a group or demographic, whether that's on the socioeconomic ladder to race, ethnicity, it's all in Red Clay. Definitely have a strong team around me. I think it's a function of leadership. We have strong principals, principal group. They're on the front line daily, leading our schools. Putting leaders in the right position. We have Dean Anthony Bolden, who is the new dean over at Cab Calloway School of the Arts. We have Kendra Todd Dixon, who is leading the Conrad Schools of Science. When we talk about representation, so it's about putting leaders in the position to be successful. So not only that our students, because again, you could take the research, the fact that if you have a black male educator, increases your graduation rate. And that's just based on empirical research. So really taking into account the theoretical and the book knowledge, and how do we put it into practice to do the transformational work that's necessary. We had to go to remote learning. So our technology department, when I came to Red Clay, we had a 1-to-1 computer platform for our students in grades 3 to 12. But only students from 6th grade to 12th grade kind of took the computers or devices home with them pre-COVID. But then when COVID hit, we were able to quickly pivot and ensure that every household had a device, and then that following year, once we opened schools in the fall of 2020, every student pre-K to 12 had access to a device. We partner with Marquivas Gideon in Nerd It Now, who is a Black-owned business entrepreneur to connect with the community, to make sure our families had issues with, Wi-Fi's, hotspots. They were able to support, our efforts. So it's just not red clay. It's really taking a whole school, a whole child, whole school, whole community approach is how I tend to think about it, because we can't do this work on our own. They're not with us 24/7, but ultimately we deal with what happens 24/7, 365. Right. Because if things happen at home at night, rest assured it's coming into school the next morning. And I think the chief among those successes, again, was Brother Newt. Really having the vision to put him in the position that he was in at Warner, understanding that he had those community connections, and the fact that he could do things in a school that needed it at that point in time that the average leader wouldn't have never been able to do, on the strength of who he was and what he represented. And so, we're looking at, how do we increase test scores? But again, graduation rate, we have an offering for just about every student, in terms of whatever their interest may be. We have career technical ed programs. We have a culinary program at McCain High School. We have an audio engineering program, right? So those students who, are constantly on their cell phones, screaming, trying to find content, how can we take that and use it in a proactive way? So most recently, partnering with Chandra Pitts and One Village Alliance, I've chaired her Raising Kings initiative for several years now, and so we had Concert Crew, which is a podcast. So it's a group of brothers who have a podcast. We actually had our audio engineering program do the work behind the scenes so that they could actually do it as a master class, right? So you have professionals who have professional podcasters, teaching our students who have the aspiration to do it, but showing them how to do it in the right way. So if you're going to spend the majority of your day on the phone, be a content creator rather than a content consumer. Right. How do you monetize that to be able to, create a small business? And so it's really just trying to create an environment where we're raising and helping young people live out their passion now. Because I think too often we'll say, oh, when you get older. Or for them, that might be too far off. Right. And we'll say that, you want to go to college? Well, a lot of them may not have come from homes. I was the first to go to college in my family. So for you to tell me, oh, you want to go to college for me was Hillman. Like it was for so many other people, right? Watching it and learning it through TV. So that's kind of the vision of the work, is how to make learning as relevant and experiential as we possibly can. Again, Red Clay has a strong foundation, and it's just building off that foundation now that we find ourselves, coming out of the pandemic and really adjusting to whatever it is, but all the social justice, injustice issues, racism, structural issues that we're dealing with in society, how do we combat all of that while still providing a strong foundation for teaching and learning in our district?
Do you feel that you have been successful in your 2.5 years?
I do. Well, I would say first and foremost because we were able to, as the largest district, navigate the pandemic in a way that we were able to provide in-person learning, but we were also able to meet the needs as best we could under the time, depending on that time, because initially we thought we were only closing for 2 weeks. Right. And then that 2 weeks extended to, for the rest of the year, and then for the rest of the year we had to open school remotely. And then by October, I want to say 19th of 2020, we started to reintroduce in-person learning. And so as we had to shift and pivot, being the largest district, again, with a high English learner population, a high students, a special needs population, being able to navigate and adjust through it all, I think we've been successful. What also looking at, again, our high need schools, and again, using Warner as that example, because it's, been in the headlines and in the press a lot because of what we're currently enduring with the loss of Newt. But even prior to that, all of that turnaround happened during the pandemic. With strong leadership. And I think that's what people fail to realize. It wasn't just the barbershop. We're also in the process of putting a dental clinic in place. Right. So all of those things were happening during the pandemic. And I think the pandemic kind of highlighted the inequities we already knew were in our system. and how can we kind of double down on our efforts and be a little bit more intentional about, meeting the diverse needs, and it's just not students within the city of Wilmington, it's our whole Cowcassin constituents, it's our families in Ellesmere, our families in Stanton, Newport. There's a diverse need, and how can we really understand that, at the end of the day, we have to meet them all. And it's an equity. Equity means giving it to the ones who need it the most, and how do we share those resources to maximize it. So, the CARES funding, we've been able to maximize to make sure we put a freedom school, summer programming. Last summer, we offered over 42 different summer program options, whether that would be remote or in-person activities, again, partnering with LACC, Latin American Community Center. So, again, really leaning on our community-based partners, children and families first, to ensure that we're meeting the needs of the community as a whole.
Do you think that a lot of the success has to do with the creativity of you using the word meeting the needs, but you've met it in a lot of different ways. Do you believe that a lot of the success that you are experiencing now with your administration is that, and you brought up Newt several times, and I was going to talk about him at the end because I know y'all had a very good, strong relationship, but do you think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you all have been able to use your creative skills?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, being innovative and not maybe so transactional, and kind of. I think one of the things with COVID is it's kind of by any means necessary. How do you? And one example would be a food pantry. I think oftentimes when we think of food pantries, we thought of it in terms of, non-perishables and dry goods, and making sure a family gets a box of. One of the things that we said, well, what about perishables?
Right.
Milk, eggs, lunch meat. So we put a commercial refrigerator in the food pantry at Warner, so that we can give them perishable items as well. And initially it was like, well, no, our facilities department stepped right up, used resources. We were innovative in really providing meals when we knew that our students were having issues when they were remote. So we outfitted our technology department, literally used our transportation department, one, to keep our bus drivers employed, because if schools were remote, we weren't transporting students back and forth. But how could we use our bus fleet to then take our technology department out in the community to fix computers? So if someone cracked a screen, our tech department had scheduled hours where they would position school buses throughout the community. So it was really just kind of, being innovative and really addressing the moment. I think we've learned a lot of lessons that we can't go back to March 2019 in terms of how the system was established, and how can we kind of use the lessons learned to move the district forward.
Wow. I know that it's hard as the leader to talk about some of the stresses or some of the tension that happens, but I know you have to have that as well.
Yeah.
So could you?
Well, I think for me the biggest lesson is the politics that are involved in it, especially now. Because everything tends to get legislated, and I think Delaware has a history of that. When you look for change, it either goes through the courts or people are legislating, right? So there has to be a lawsuit for things to change. And it's making sure that we do the right changes and we do them in the right time, but also making sure that our students don't get caught up in a lot of the rhetoric and a lot of the politics and a lot of the infighting, because at the end of the day, we're doing it for them. And so for me, it's always, when you have those frustrating moments, or you're looking at the debate or which side of this issue should you land on, it's going back to what's in the best interest of a child.
And that's your perspective, and that's why I think you got so much success. But oftentimes, a lot of the critics could care less about the best interest of the child. It's about their best interest politically.
And what's expedient in that moment. And I have to realize that this too shall kind of pass, and whatever the issue is today is going to be a different issue tomorrow, but that child is still going to come regardless of what that issue is. And so how do we stay grounded and really, again, making sure that we do what I've been hired to do, which is ultimately lead a school district on behalf of children and families, and how can we actually work and support families? Yeah.
As an African American male, I'm asking this question to you as a leader as well. How have you? Did you feel? I know you worked under others. Did you feel it was a little bit more tension with you trying to push creative things forward, or do you feel like it's just the Delaware way?
I think it's part the Delaware way, but I think if in anytime you're black and you're in a position of leadership, I think we've always felt like we have to do more, right, to justify it. And I've gotten to the point where it's now like you're going to think and have your mindset of who you perceive me to be regardless. So if I'm going to do it based on your perception, then 9 times out of 10 I'm likely doing it for the wrong reason.
Okay.
So I've tried to just ground myself again and making sure that, you know, I've had success doing it this way thus far. So if it's not broke, why try to fix it? And a mentor of mine kind of grounded in me that regardless of where you're going to help a child anywhere, so sometimes maybe it is a different season, you know, and if it gets to that point, then, you know, who knows what doors might open. But right now I'm planted where I need to be, and we're gonna keep doing the work, albeit it is hard. I mean, definitely it is hard. I think, you know, because we're dealing with people's lives and livelihoods.
That's right.
And we see the end result of when we don't do it right, when we look at, you know, the murder rate, and when we look at what our young men in particular are doing out in the community. So for every life that we lose as a result of senseless gun violence, that's a direct reflection on we failed someone somewhere along the way, and how can we, you know, again, continue to build a system where they choose a different route and learn from the mistakes that others have made, rather than going through the same mistakes that they've seen others make, or you know, promote or sensationalize that's the kind of life that you would want to live or lead. So schools play a major role in it.
What time does your day start?
So typically, I mean, I'm up around 5:30, 6 o'clock, in the office between 7:30, and, you know, any given day it may end at 7. And even during a pandemic, I mean, we were 16-hour days continuously for 2 years straight.
Wow.
You know, weekends, because now with Zoom, you know, everyone has access to being, so let's throw a Zoom meeting on there, and, you know, we're meeting well into the evening. So I think that's probably been one of the biggest challenges that I've seen on educators, and I'd be remiss not to acknowledge our teachers, you know, our custodians, our school nutrition workers. There are so many people behind, you know, the scenes, who are on the front lines daily, who make this thing move and go. Couldn't do it without them, and so even that work around our educators, it's a lot of stress on them as well. You know, trying to teach remotely, but also tend to your own child at home. You know, so there were a lot of, again, lessons that I think we've had to learn, you know, through this. So, you know, we continue to have our struggles. It's not perfect by no means, but I think there's the good outweighs the negative or the bad. Yeah,
we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with our final segment. What's next for Dr. Greene? A person, in my opinion, who you certainly have mastered the soft skills. You certainly have mastered the intellectual curiosity that every person tries to obtain when you're a scholar. But I'm sure all of my viewers wonder, what's next? We'll be right back. And we're back. Last round, and I'm just excited. This has been a great opportunity for us to have a conversation with Dr. Greene, and he has certainly shared so much. He has been the example to how where you're from never dictate where you're going. This is just great for us today. Dr. Greene, as I look at your life from high school, from elementary school, from elementary school, high school, through college, success have been written over your life. And it wasn't written over your life because you were given a gold spoon when you were born, but because you've stayed focused, even in probably some unfocused moments. But I know there has to be someone thinking, what are you planning to do in the future with Red Clay? We don't know, because a person of your skill set, we don't know how long, but what are some of your plans for Red Clay?
So I think the immediate next step for us is we're going to go through a strategic plan process, to be quite honest, and really, again, take the lessons learned, you know, through COVID, through the pandemic. Our current plan sunsets in the summer of 2022. So we're going to actually take the next year to really, again, regroup, engage our community, level set where we are. Again, we have a lot of unique programs and offerings, successful programs and offerings. How can we expand those programs and offerings and really adjust to figure out how to better, again, meet the needs? We have a changing demographic. As I mentioned, our English learner population continues to be an ever-increasing, growing population. Our students with disabilities, especially coming after COVID with so much learning loss happening, students not really maybe having full access in the traditional sense. And so how do we create and cultivate a plan, again, to try to best meet the needs of our diverse stakeholder group. And then personally, like I said, I have a son who's heading off to college, two daughters to continue to invest in and support along with my family. And no longer being ABD, you know, and so that's the number one priority right now, and just staying engaged with our community. I think there's so many positive things within Wilmington, within Delaware and Red Clay in particular, that we have to get beyond just looking at it from a deficit mindset and really looking at assets. You know, not being a native Delawarean, I'm always amazed of the positioning of Delaware. You know, you're 2 hours south of New York. You're 90 minutes north of D.C., 45 minutes from Baltimore, 35 minutes, 40 minutes south of Philly. A train ride away, like literally 3 international airports. It's how can Red Clay be a true destination location for any family who's really looking to relocate in this area. We know some of our neighboring districts, especially in the Middletown area, they're growing by leaps and bounds. But how can we make Red Clay so when folks want to decide whether or not they want to move back into the city of Wilmington, they want to look for a Red Clay address or Red Clay residence to have their child go to a school within Red Clay. So that's the ultimate vision. And for our educators, you know, where do I want to work? You know, I want them to say Red Clay is the district because they are valued not just as a teacher, as an educator, but as a person or an individual. So it's really, you know, building that community mindset and really enhancing our district. And that takes partnerships with our faith community, with our nonprofits, you know, philanthropic business community to really galvanize our collective effort to make sure that we're creating environments where our students can ultimately thrive and grow.
The big question is, where do you, let's just so we won't get people nervous, where do you see Dr. Greene ending up? What is your ultimate desire?
You know, Doc, I mean, that's a hard, I'm planted where I am now, but like I said, I probably have applied for 2 jobs in particular. Otherwise, I've been kind of guided. So my first assistant principalship, my principal at the time, who I worked under, Cheryl Arnold, encouraged me to go back and get my master's and told me to apply for my first assistant principal job. So it really was my leaving Brandywine was kind of a conscious decision of, okay, I felt like that I was moving into a different season, and then leaving the department to come to Red Clay, where the 2 real conscious ones was like, okay, I'm applying for this because I want, and right now I'm content with where I am and the work that we're doing. I think there's work to be done here in Red Clay, and you know, building leadership, creating a succession plan so that whatever may happen, if another opportunity presents itself, or if I'm in it long enough to reap the benefit of a retirement, that I leave the situation in better hands than when I inherited it. So
you know, so if by some chance the next governor decide that, you know what, I love the creativity, the intellect, the leadership of Dr. Greene, I think he would make a great Secretary of Education. Would you turn that down?
I'm going to call Dr. Carey and say, Dr. Carey, we need to pray on that.
You're going to, well, and the reason why I said...
I wouldn't. I mean, again, I would be a fool to say that I would not entertain any open door. But it would have to be the right decision, again, for me, from my family, and not one that I would just make blindly. But again, right now, I feel I'm content with where I am and planning where I need to be.
Yeah, you know, there's a term called prognostication, and basically predicting. I know that you're not looking for that, but you wasn't looking for most of the stuff that the Lord has blessed you with. But I ask that because your creativity side is where I'm attracted to. I believe, even as a pastor here at Zion Fair, this church is 103 years old. I'm the youngest pastor it has ever had. And I came outside the box, doing things that were different from the normal church style of doing things. This is what's happening in Red Clay. You have hired people, like we will speak of Newton in a minute, and others. And he's not the only one.
Right.
And they're being creative, and you're giving them the freedom. That should not be limited to a school district.
Right.
That's why I asked that question. And I hope that one of my negotiation terms is going to be, because I'm very big on education, is that whoever the next, and I'll say the current one is doing a good job. I'm not, no disparity on that person. But whoever the new governor is, I hope that he will hear my cry, because I have already started singing your praises, because I've been paying attention to what you're doing. Our young people, not just black, our young people need someone who understands life beyond the textbook.
Yeah. And I agree. I mean, a textbook is only going to show you but so much.
Absolutely.
And I think we have to expand their world, their experiences, and their horizon to understand their potential. And I think, and I'll say this, we've really tapped into student voice because they have a lot to say.
Yes.
And I think this particular generation in particular, having, a teenager, I tap in with my son all the time just to say, listen, because I'm old, I'm gray, and a lot of their minds is like, oh, gee,
don't say you're old and gray because you're still younger than me. I don't like that.
But they think we're out of touch.
I got you.
And so really staying tapped into not the lingo to be cool, but to really understand how they see the world. And I think our educational system, we need to evolve a little bit. We need to be more innovative. And more flexible in how we address these needs, because they're truly living in a world right now where, you got nations at war.
Yes. Yeah.
And who knows, with the pandemic, no one anticipated. We thought, again, it was going to be 2 weeks. We're now going on 3 years into it.
Absolutely.
And so, how can we be, flexible, adaptable, to that work? And so I think as a leader, I have to be open to whatever potential changes might come down the line as well. So
Have you ever thought about on the university level?
Yeah, I love higher ed. I think any way to change. So my doctorate is in organizational leadership. So,
Okay.
so I'm always fond of just seeing how things operate. As a leader yourself, right? It's not just your sermon. You don't prepare just sermon. It's how do you put the right people in place, and how do things function and operate and flow. So I'm always keen to just really look at how things operate. You'll take an organization like a Chick-fil-A. Well, their organizational structure is very different than a franchise McDonald's versus a corporate McDonald's. And so really being tapped into how can we put people in the best position and create systems where people can thrive. So that's definitely something that, I try to pay particular attention to. And my strong suit, I feel I'm a visionary leader.
Yes.
And I have to surround myself around detailed, oriented people who can ultimately help carry that vision
You even
out.
sound good as a college president, Dr. Allen. Keep him in mind, all right? Because you're absolutely right. And I like the way you have just shared the whole. You can't just be the person who can visualize things and have a vision, but you got to have the right people around you as well. So excellent. Dr. Greene, thank you so much for taking this time to share with me today. I'm excited when you agreed to come on the show. I was excited then. It couldn't come fast enough for me because I wanted my viewers to know that there are black brothers who are positive, who are making things happen. And that matters to us. That matters to not only to me as a pastor, but to me as an educator, to me as a black man, that we have brothers who are just trying to do what they can to just keep life moving. And that's so important.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, and I'd say to your son, your wife, and your two daughters that they have a gym, because you know both sides of the equation, and that's important. So I appreciate you so much.
I'm fortunate to have them, and I appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you.
We know you're fortunate to have them, but I want to give you your props, because that is what's missing in our community with African American males. They are not given the true props that's desired, because all too often we look at getting these type of compliments as I don't want to take any glory.
Right.
all glory belongs to God, but you were an open, willing vessel to be able to do what he needed you to do. So we appreciate you for that. I want to give you an opportunity. Before we go, I want to just say a few things about Newt, who was a very faithful member here at East Zion Fair and a good friend. And I got emails from when he started with the barbershop, when he was great, started with the dental stuff. And he always wanted me to come over and bless the school. But then we started sending our ministers over to do his Friday prayers, I believe it is. But you had what struck me, and I said this on the show we were on together, is I didn't know who you were, because I didn't follow at that time. And you came in and you I didn't know whether you was crying or you was hurt. You was hurt. I could tell you was hurt. And I said to his wife, I said, "Who is that?" And she shared who you were. And I said, "Man, that's wonderful to see a brother can care about another brother to a level where you can stop what you're doing," because I know you probably was busy that day, to come and see about an employee, but most of all a friend.
Yeah, and he truly was. Again, we were put in the position of me coming on board and him serving in the manner in which he was at that time, that I knew early on, again, vision, that he was to serve a bigger purpose in Red Clay. And obviously he's irreplaceable. The street renaming will take place this Thursday at 11. We're naming the ACE Mindfulness Room, because his line name was ACE. Yeah. So we're going to have the ACE Mindfulness Room at Warner as well. We're going to dedicate the library to him. And so we're going to plant little seeds and reap the benefit of his leadership. And one of the things that, I would always, and I said this during the service, is he knew that he had a limited amount of time to have the greatest amount of impact. And so now it's for us to kind of carry out that work and just not make it solely about what he was doing at Warner, but ultimately look at who he was and how he represented Wilmington as a whole. And how can we plant seeds throughout the city and ultimately reap the benefit. So I miss my brother. There's not a day that doesn't go by, to this point where, it was a professional relationship, but it also became, one personal, where, we sharpened each other, especially during that pandemic. Right. I was the only, then there's two black superintendents, Dr. Vi Cade, who is the superintendent in Capital School District. But at that point, I was the only black superintendent in the state of Delaware. And as only black leader. So, we had mutual understanding of the difficulties as leading as black men. So we relied on each other as spiritual brothers as well. We prayed for one another. We rode motorcycles together, and we led through the educational platform together. So there were a number of different parallels in terms of how we connected and related to each other through that. And I know he always spoke highly of you, and said, "Man, you got to meet my pastor." And
because I was taller than him.
Truly, right. And so, unfortunate, but I'm thankful that I've had the opportunity to meet you and the opportunity to sit down and learn about your leadership and ultimately what you're doing for the community as well.
Great. If there's one thing you want to leave with our community as a parting word, certainly you have this moment.
I would just say, just stay engaged. Thank you for your continued support. Reach out. Don't feel like if things are hard or things are going well too, give us a shout out, because I think it's easy for the negative to outweigh the positive. And if your child is having a positive experience, email the teacher, email the coach, email the principal. Interesting enough, last year at Conrad's graduation, the valedictorian highlighted that a school nutrition worker had the greatest impact on her. Wow. And the person that she looked forward to seeing the most when she came back to school was a lunch lady, right? And so, we got to really understand that regardless of who you are, what you're going through, stay positive. You can impact somebody's life in a positive way, and that's ultimately what we're looking to build in Red Clay.
Excellent. We'll be right back. And we're back. Listen, time got away from us. What a great interview we had today with Dr. Greene. I'm impressed. The trajectory of his life was just unbelievable. He shared truth. I'm also impressed with the fact when I can see African-American males who can share their faith and not be so overwhelmed with it to the point where they lose focus on what God has called them really to do. What a great interview. I hope and trust that you enjoyed the show today. Until we get together again, God bless you.